All right, we're going to turn our attention to our next presenter. So if I could have your attention, please. We have Kati here from the FTC. Thank you so much, Kati.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here today, and I really enjoyed the panel before me and want to thank you all. I'm from the Federal Trade Commission, which is the nation's consumer protection agency. And so if you've ever experienced scams or fraud, gotten unsolicited text messages and robocalls, or if you know anyone who's lost money to a scammer, we're the federal agency that's out there trying to stop scams and protect people from fraud. And so today I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is that we do at the Federal Trade Commission, and also talk to you about some ways that you can make your very important voices heard in our work. Because we know that not everyone in the country, not everyone in every community knows what the FTC is. So we work really hard to try to build relationships with trusted people in communities all across the country to find out what are the scams, what are the frauds going on in those communities, and to empower our partners to help spread the word and protect people. We know that there's a lot of shame around scams and fraud, and people don't want to talk about it when they've lost money. And so it's really important, and we can all contribute to protecting our communities by getting involved in warning people about scams and fraud, and also letting your government know what it is that's happening in the community so that we can do our job better. So a little overview about what I'm going to cover today. First, I'll talk about working together with the FTC at a really high level and give you a sense of what we do and how we can work together. So our bread and butter is law enforcement. I'll talk about that, but I'll also talk about our important outreach and policy work. But then I want to get a little more detailed and mention to you 3 different rulemakings that we have going on right now, where I think hearing from people from diverse communities around the country and also hearing from a diverse group of small businesses is going to be really important for us to make sure that we get the law right and pass the best regulations we can to protect people. So I'm going to encourage everyone to weigh in on these rulemakings if you are interested. So first of all, just to start with an overview of the FTC, one of the important things that we do is get information from the public about scams and fraud that are affecting them. So we have our own site, reportfraud.ftc.gov, where we hear from people directly, but we also get reports from our law enforcement partners, from BBBs, from organizations around the country, and this information, we get tens of thousands of complaints per week. It really helps us understand what is it that's going on around the country and where do we need to protect people better. And the good thing about filing reports at reportfraud.ftc.gov is that those reports are shared with over 3,000 law enforcement officials around the country so that all of us can be trying to take action to stop fraud. And the other thing I wanted to note is that people don't need to fill out every piece of information that's requested there. So if you have folks that you work with who aren't comfortable complaining to the federal government about something that happened to them, they can just put what happened to them. They don't have to put all their personal information. Or an organization can complain on their behalf so that, that can be the contact point if we need a witness about a certain scam or something like that. So what do we do with these reports? Of course, every day we are looking through them and trying to use them to inform our law enforcement, but also we use them to analyze and tell us what's going on around the country so we can warn people about particular scams. In 2021, we got more than 5.7 million consumer reports, which was an increase over previous years. And I'm going to talk about the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has unfortunately made things even worse around the country when it comes to scams and fraud. Our top categories of reports you can see there are 1, identity theft, 2, imposter scams, and I'm going to talk more about that. That can be posing as a government agency, a business, a family member, so all kinds of imposter scams. And then the number 3 type of report we got was about credit bureau issues. Further analysis of the reports that we get in really helps give us insights about scams that are affecting particular communities. Sorry, my clicker is slow here. Maybe it's not working. Oh, okay. So one of the things that we've done with these reports is to analyze how different frauds are affecting communities of color in particular, and try to make sure that because people around the country don't always know who the Federal Trade Commission is, are we really hearing from every community in the country so that we can protect every community in the country? And if you're interested in this, you can look at the report here, which was released last fall. What our analysis has showed us is that no, unfortunately, we receive fewer complaints from, for example, majority Black communities, majority Latino communities. And so it's really important that we are out looking for what are the scams that are affecting those communities. And this report lays out not only how we've done that, but the particular law enforcement actions that we've brought to protect people in different communities. One of the things that comes up there is the prevalence of scams, particularly related to COVID during the pandemic. And we just saw during the first year of the pandemic that there was a flourishing of deceptive COVID treatment and prevention claims in the marketplace. And so we have issued hundreds of warning letters to marketers. And I wanted to mention, including to marketers that specifically targeted Korean American communities. So we issued a warning letter to a social media marketer challenging COVID-19 treatment and prevention claims made in Korean about its products. I also wanted to mention a case called QYK Brands, LLC, where we allege that the marketers failed to deliver on promises they made, that they could quickly ship PPE products that people needed, and also about supposed preventatives for COVID-19. This was marketed to Vietnamese American communities using Vietnamese language videos and an interview-style news broadcast on Saigon Entertainment Television in Southern California. So we filed that complaint in federal district court in August of 2020, and that case is currently pending. So what is the goal of these law enforcement actions? Obviously, we want to stop the fraud, stop the scams from happening, but the ultimate goal is to get money back from the scammers and return it to the people who lost the money to the scams. And so just a quick overview here, in the calendar year 2021, we were able to return $472.4 million in refunds. And so that's another important reason that people should report what is happening to them to the Federal Trade Commission, is because sometimes we don't have perfect data from the scammers about who got scammed. And we need to look to our own complaint database to see who got scammed and be able to contact people for refunds. Yes? Right, so Faith, for those online, Faith is asking a great question about when people got a refund, when had they filed a complaint? Usually I would say it's a matter of years, because when you file a complaint, we see that we can start building a case behind the scenes, which often for these scammers involves sending basically subpoenas, they're called civil investigative demands, to the people they're doing business with, and try to build a complaint without them knowing it so that they don't send their money elsewhere. And then quite often for scammers, we go into federal court and ask the judge to freeze all of their accounts, and we ask for access to the business premises. But we have to have a really strong case if a judge is going to allow us to do that. So it takes time to build the case, then we file, and then at the end of the case, if we either settle or win the case, that's when we can give refunds back to consumers. Thank you for the question. And others, please chime in if you have questions throughout. We can make it. Any contractors? You know, it's a great question. It's a fantastic question. You know, as I should have mentioned this already, and I'll mention it more later, but our mission is not only to protect consumers, but also small businesses. Our statute allows us to treat small businesses just like consumers. So we bring a lot of cases where scammers are targeting small businesses. And you may have seen scams like people calling about office supplies or people calling about, you know, internet listing companies. There are many, many different scams that target small businesses. And so we are able to bring cases and then give redress to people involved in those cases where we can. I don't want to overpromise anything because, as you can imagine, a lot of times the scammers spend a lot of the money before we get to them. But that is our goal and something that we've been able to do. You know, every year we're giving back millions of dollars. Thank you for the question. So the other major part of our mission is to try to prevent scams from happening in the first place. So we put a lot of emphasis on consumer and business education and free resources to get out the word to people about about what's going on in the community and how they can avoid scams. And one of the things that makes me proud, even though I'm an enforcement attorney with the Federal Trade Commission, I work very closely with our Division of Consumer and Business Education, and I'm really proud of that group because they're very sophisticated in terms of communicating with different groups of people. And I know from experience that they really appreciate input about what is working with our messages and what isn't working and how we could do a better job of reaching people across the country. So this slide just gives you a few examples of that. Over the years, we've been listening to people in different communities to learn about the issues affecting them and the most effective ways to help educate members of the community. So we have a lot of different examples here. On the top left, consumer.ftc.gov. That's where you can find all of our articles and publications about the whole array of consumer protection topics. But just below that, consumer.ftc.gov is a website specifically for consumers who want just the basics, and that's written in a very plain and simple style. And so it's very popular with legal services attorneys, community groups, and teachers, people who are working with limited English proficiency, consumers. And it also contains PowerPoint presentations about the whole array of consumer protection issues in order to present to those groups. Pass It On, over there on the right, is an education campaign that's specifically focusing on older adults and empowering them to share what they know with others and play an active part in the fight against fraud. And then we've also created other materials over the years. Here there's an example of one of our Spanish language fotonovelas, which are comic book style booklets that help raise awareness about scams, particularly targeting the Latino community. I wanted to note that all of these materials are considered in the public domain. There's no copyright. Our whole goal is just to get the word out about these things. So we really love it when community groups or businesses or anyone picks up the warnings and the language that we put out and uses it to help educate their own constituents. I also wanted to note that you can order free print publications from the FTC. If you go to bulkorder.ftc.gov and look at that catalog, there's a lot there about how to avoid scams, business guidance, privacy and cybersecurity issues, including particularly for small businesses and more. And just pausing for a moment on small business education, we refreshed and relaunched our campaign called Green Lights and Red Flags, which is FTC Rules of the Road for Business, have a lot of information for small businesses about how to make sure that you're both complying with the law and then also protected from scams. And then we also work to make our information available in other languages. Everything's available in Spanish, but over time we're trying to increase the other languages where we make things available. And if you look at ftc.gov/languages, there we pull together all of the different materials that we've published in other languages. And I'll also note that we have been active trying to reach groups. One of the ways we've done it is through ethnic media briefings in many, many cities all across the country, bringing together all of the ethnic media outlets from that particular city and talking about different fraud and scams and how they might want to warn those particular communities. But if you have other ideas about better ways to reach communities throughout the country, I'd be all ears for that as well. Okay, so with that, I want to turn to some ways that you could make your voice heard with the FTC in a way that could really have an impact. Because we have 3 rulemakings going on right now where we're looking for public comments, and these are on issues that I think might be of interest to you. What I'll do is I'm just going to go through them all very quickly, and then if anyone's interested in hearing more about any of these, I'll be happy to answer your questions or talk more about them. So one of our rulemakings going on right now is the Impersonator Rulemaking. And if you've ever received a call that was supposedly from a utility company telling you that your light was about to be cut off if you didn't pay, or a call from a supposed government agent who really wasn't, then there's a lot of impersonator fraud out there, and some of it specifically targets small businesses. And what we are hoping to do is to get information from the community about how prevalent are these scams, what are the worst types, how do they harm people, because if we end up being able to justify passing a rule about impersonator fraud, that would help us protect consumers we could seek civil penalties against scammers and have other tools to help protect consumers. So we sought comments from the public about a wide range of questions already. The comment period for the first phase of this already closed, but if we do move forward with the rulemaking, there will be an actual draft text of a rule, and we'll be seeking public comments on that. So if you're interested in that topic, you should keep an eye out for that. The second one of the 3 is about earnings claims. And one thing that we've seen before the pandemic, but definitely proliferating during the pandemic, are income scams. People claiming you can make a lot of money. It might be through a supposed business opportunity where you can work from home. It might be an online social media thing where they're claiming this is a gifting circle or something like that. It might be a gig work offer saying you can make a lot of money. Or it could be a total job scam. All of these have in common claims that people can make a lot of money where those claims are not true. And we right now have a rulemaking going on. We've already brought over 129 enforcement actions since 2000 against companies that made deceptive earnings claims and obtained more than $530 million to return to consumers, but it's still a problem. So we're considering a rule on these issues, and the comment period is open right now until May 10th, and we're looking to understand what kinds of income scams are out there in the community, how do they hurt people, what's the effect on consumers and communities and others. And so we would love any comments from people who have information or ideas about this topic. And then finally, I'm ending with the telemarketing sales rule because this set of questions has a lot to do with small businesses, and we'd really love your input. The telemarketing sales rule is a broad rule that just covers telemarketing. So if you're familiar with the do not call list or the fact that sales robocalls are generally illegal, all of that is under the telemarketing sales rule. But we are considering a pretty major expansion of this rule that would affect small businesses. Right now, business-to-business calls are exempt from most of the rule's provisions. But what we know these days is that many people are working from home. They're using a single phone for personal and business calls. And we want to ask, does the exemption for business-to-business calls mean that people who are working from home are less protected from unwanted calls? And does that still make sense in this day and age? So we're seeking comment on whether that business-to-business exemption should be kept or should be repealed or modified. So we have basically a 60-day comment period for this, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it if you have questions about it. But we would love to hear if there are small businesses being affected by telemarketing scams or just unwanted telemarketing, and you think it would be good for us to expand our rule on those topics, it would be great to hear from you. So that is what I prepared. I also have my email address. Oh, no, wait, there's one more slide. Staying connected with the FTC, and this is an important one. I shouldn't forget it, because there are some really easy ways that if you are interested in scams and fraud, that you can stay connected with us and find out what are the newest things out there. What do you need to look out for in your own life? Or what should you warn your mom about, or your dad, or your community? And it's so simple to sign up at ftc.gov/consumer alerts, or the same site in Spanish, and you'll get our little blog posts that come out telling you this is the newest thing we're seeing, or we brought a big case, and if you were affected by it, here's how to get a refund. You get those kinds of updates from us. We're also on social media, and we put together a lot of good videos. So if you are interested in sharing any of those with the community, you can look for us on YouTube. And then finally, we have an advocates list for people who who work with communities and want to hear from us when there's something we think would be particularly relevant. We'll send it to you, and it's an easy way to just keep up to date on those very important announcements for folks working with different communities around the country. Okay, so that is the end of what I've prepared, but I'm very happy to take questions now, and I've also put my email address there if anyone would like to contact me outside of the event.
Hi, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to.
Okay.
I don't take any drugs. Okay? My clients who don't take drugs are healthier than my clients that do. The biggest spreader of misinformation on COVID, I was told, were the holistic doctors that are MDs that I know I've been following for 30 years. That, to me, is reverse fraud, whatever you want to call it. And, again, you don't have to answer the question. What are you doing for reverse fraud?
Very interesting. Thank you. You know, I can really understand what you're saying, and it's been a huge battle during the pandemic to combat misinformation about health. And I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but we've had to work really hard on that in connection with other government partners, like the FDA. And we've issued a lot of warning letters and focused a lot on product claims and health claims related to, you know, supposed treatments, supposed cures, and the array of things that people are touting as supposedly helpful with the pandemic is truly shocking. So that is a fight where we're really engaged, and I appreciate your question a lot.
Hello?
Hi, Katie. Thanks so much. Matt Velan, Filipino American Chamber of Commerce, D.C. I wanted to know if you're seeing any specific scams in the Filipino community. For example, one of the things that we've seen, honestly, it's around vaccines. I know someone that got scammed. They said, oh, I can send your family vaccines in the Philippines, just send me your information, and resulted in a scam. So I just wanted to know if you're seeing anything in that community specifically. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. And actually, if you have any specific information about that scam, I'd love for you to send it to me. Yes, thank you. You know, in addition to vaccine scams in a number of communities, I have heard, I think in an ethnic media briefing, from somebody in the Filipino community who was talking about what we call a chain referral scheme, which is like a pyramid scheme online. And I can't remember the name that they called it, but I will pause for this on this for a second because this is a very common type of income scam that we're seeing right now, where it's called different names in different communities because the scammers are trying to basically build on real community efforts to help one another and share money. So, for example, it can be called a susu, which is something that comes out of West African tradition, or a gifting circle, or a blessing loom. And the idea of all of these is that you pay a certain amount of money, and then you recruit a certain number of people, and you're going to get a lot more money in the future. And what that is a pure pyramid scheme. There's not even any product or anything like that. And because of the structure of it, it's going to harm more people than it helps. And so it's illegal. But we've seen a lot of those proliferating during the pandemic, and I have heard of that in the Filipino community as well. Yes, yes, it's really pernicious. Thanks for your question. Yes.
Good afternoon, Charles Dorsey. I'm wondering, when Faith asked the question earlier, I believe you said that recourse takes about 2 years in order to see return on your case. And as an African-American person, that is eerily similar to some of the justice proceedings that we see. So I was triggered by that. My concern is, or my question is, what do you guys say, right? Because in 2 years' time, you've gotten scammed like 5 more times, right? And then by the time that you get the response, you've almost forgotten the injury. So what are you saying to communities who have been traumatized by long-term waits for retribution and, I don't want to say restoration, but retribution? Like, what do you say to them? Because that's a really tough thing to ask communities to do, timeline considered.
Yeah.
I hope that's a fair question.
Absolutely. I completely understand the question, and I think it's a really tough one. And, to be clear and to make it even worse, we're not even able to respond to every report that somebody files on a law enforcement level, because we get tens of thousands of them in every week. And so it's actually, even worse. It's like your report might go in there and the FTC might pick it up, or 3,000 other law enforcers might pick it up, but also it's possible that it won't get picked up. And then even if it does, it can take years to get any money back if you do. So that is a reality that we do struggle with, and that is very concerning. One thing that we've done in the past couple of years that I hope has helped many, many people, but not everyone, is that we've started, when people originally file a report with us, instead of just getting an acknowledgement that your report has been filed, Now we give some personalized information to each person who lost money about what they can do right then to try to get their money back. And I do know that that is really important because, for example, if anyone you know or you lost money to a scam or fraud of any kind and you paid for it using your credit card, you could probably get that money back. You have to file a chargeback with your credit card company. And, I know that many of us know that, but a lot of people don't know that. And so one of the things we do now is we say, how did you pay? And then we immediately get that information. If you paid by credit card, do a chargeback. If you paid by gift card, here's what you should do. If you paid by wire transfer, et cetera. And then try to give some educational information also, because as you note, it's extremely concerning but true that once someone is scammed one time, they can be scammed again because they could be put on lists that the scammers circulate, et cetera. So we also try to provide educational information. But it's something that I think, frankly, a lot of parts of government have a long way to go on trying to work with those issues. So I really appreciate the comment. Great. Okay, well, this has been incredibly interesting to me, and I hope a little bit interesting to some of you. And if you'd like to keep in touch with me, I would be thrilled.